It's wonderful being here with you again. And, I just wanted to talk a little bit this morning about courage, because bravery is really what helped establish this country. And it has so much to do with so many things that happened in my life. And I remember specifically one particular neurosurgical case. There's a disease called Van Hippel-Lindau, in which people develop these tumors throughout their nervous system. And there was a young man who developed one right in the middle of his brainstem. This is an inoperable area, so none of the adult neurosurgeons wanted to operate on him. And it turns out, unfortunately for me, that his wife was a pediatric neurosurgery nurse. So I couldn't escape her. And she kept saying, "You've got to operate on my husband." And I said, "But I'm a pediatric neurosurgeon. He's an adult." And she says, "Well, he acts like a child." So, but, she wore me down. I finally went, I said, "I'll talk to him." And I said, "Craig, if I operate on this tumor where it's located, there's at least a 50-50 chance that you will die on the table." And he said, "But Doc, if you don't operate, there's a 100% chance that I'll die." And I said, "That sounds pretty mature." So, took him to the operating room, got down to the brainstem area. It was full of abnormal blood vessels. And, I opened a very tiny hole in the side of the pons in the area where I kind of figured the tumor was just maybe a centimeter in from there. And then used a small probe, and I felt something that felt a little different in consistency. I put in my little instrument and grabbed and started pulling it out and trying to deliver it. You can't make much of a hole there because the brainstem is like a coaxial cable. Everything is essential. And as we were delivering the tumor, the evoked potentials went flat. It's like the EKG for the brain. And the anesthesiologist said, "You may as well stop. You killed him. He's dead." Because the anesthesiologist was against the operation. But, we just continued. The mood was rather somber. We closed him up, and, he went back to the ICU on life support. But, when I came in the next morning, he had been extubated. He was sitting up in the bed telling jokes. So now, it took a lot of courage to do that operation that other people were not willing to do. And that happened to me a lot of times during the course of my career. But it wasn't because I was all that great. It was because I always asked God for guidance and asked Him for wisdom. And that's where real courage comes from. It doesn't come from within me. It comes from God and knowing who has all the power. And, that guided me in my journey from medicine to politics. Now, it doesn't mean that I became a politician. I always correct people. I'm not a politician. And I hope to God that I never become one, frankly. Okay? But, after that prayer breakfast speech, everybody was saying, "You should run for president." I said, "Come on, give me a break. Are you kidding me? It's the last thing in the world I wanted to But every place I went, there were people with Run, Ben, Run signs. I had over 500,000 petitions in my office. I could barely get my foot in there. And, I finally said, Lord, this is not something that particularly appeals to me, but do recognize that people who run for president, they have an organization. They have a Rolodex with all the names. They have big campaign chests. They have all these. I don't have any of that stuff, nor do I intend to go out and develop it. Therefore, if you want me to do this, you have to supply all that stuff. Next thing I knew, I had an organization. We're raising more money a month than the RNC. I mean, it was just, it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. So, but, as I entered that field, where the courage came in, I knew what it would mean. Because in our society today, for some people on the other side, the only thing worse than Satan is a black conservative. Because, if you're black, you're supposed to think a certain way. And if you don't think that way, then, you're Uncle Tom, you've done all this kind of stuff. To me, you know what that sounds like? Racism. But, I knew I would be attacked. I would go from being a hero to being the GOAT. All these things. I knew that I would take a big cut in income. All these things would happen. But I started thinking, what if all the other people who preceded me, who helped make this into a great country, had taken that attitude? Where would we be? And some of us just have to go out there and we have to just ask God, what would you have me do? And ask for the wisdom to do it and not worry about the consequences. God will take care of the consequences. And what we have is a country where we don't guarantee people anything, but we advocate for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all of our people. And when we have strayed from those things, that's when we have gotten into trouble. When it comes to liberty, we as a nation made a huge mistake with slavery. There is no question about it. But what do wise people do? They learn from the mistakes. Okay? And there are a lot of things that we can learn from slavery. One of the things that I learned from it, people who were slave owners thought that they owned the slaves, that were their property, and they could do anything they wanted to them, beat them, rape them, kill them, whatever they wanted to do. And it was okay because it belonged to them. But there were others who said, no, that's abominable. There's no way I can participate in that. And then there were those, the abolitionists, who said, not only can I not participate in it, but I have to stand up for those who are being killed, who are being enslaved. Okay? I used to be pro-choice. And I said, I don't believe in abortion, but I'm not going to stop anybody else from doing what they want to do. What if the abolitionists had felt that way? Where would we be? Okay, those lives of those slaves were important, and the lives of our little babies are important. And, as a pediatric neurosurgeon, I operated on lots of babies that were premature, 25, 26, 27, 28 weeks gestation. I asked the head of the ACLU one time, I said, would you advocate for babies that are still in the mother's womb? Because you say you speak for those who can't speak for themselves. They certainly can't speak for themselves. He says, no, I can't do that. I said, well, what about the ones who are premature, 25, 26, 27 weeks? They're in an incubator, we're taking care of. Oh, yeah, no problem. I said, so the one that is in the safest place that they can possibly be in the universe, you can't advocate for, but this one you can't. He said, I know it doesn't make much sense, but I believe a woman can kill that baby until the moment it is born. And I said, would you say that in public? And he said, no. Now they will actually say it in public. This is where our society has gone. This is where the values have gone. Human life that is viable outside of the womb, and they make it into an issue of women's rights. It has nothing to do with women's rights, It has to do with dignity of human life. And we have a creator who was wise enough to recognize that there is no more sacred bond than that between a mother and that child she is carrying. And they have perverted that bond into something that becomes evil in some people's eyes. And this is something that's horrible and something that's harming me and something that I have the right to kill. How in the world did we as a society get to that point? Think about this. And we have to be willing to talk about these things. And it's our willingness to talk about them, to stand up for people's rights, that have resulted in this becoming the nation that it has become. And a lot of people criticize our nation and say that we're a horrible place and that, the rich are ruining everything and that this group is ruining everything. If we're so horrible, why are people forming caravans trying to get here? Think about that. We are compassionate people, but what is compassion? Real compassion is being fair to everybody. Not picking one specific group and saying that their rights trump everybody else. Everybody gets equal rights, but nobody gets extra rights. That is something that characterizes a fair nation. And, when it comes to the pursuit of happiness, it's about creating opportunities for people. It's not about guaranteeing people anything. Free this and free that and free everything. Newsflash, it's not free. Somebody's got to pay for it. And, this whole thing about, the rich aren't paying their fair share. As when I was running, you may remember that I said, who's the fairest individual in the universe? God. And what did he say? He said, I want a tithe. He didn't say, if you have a bumper crop, give me a triple tithe. He didn't say, if your crops fail, you don't owe me anything. 10%. You make $1 billion, you pay $100 million. You make $10, you pay $1. Why is that complex? When it's only when people start injecting their own opinion into it that it becomes complex. We make all of these things complex when we have the ability to do it the right way. And being fair, what about being fair to our children and to our grandchildren and not giving them untold debt to have to pay off, which will severely compromise the quality of their lives? We have to be thinking about that. And helping others, that's what we do, people of faith. You know, when I was growing up, you know, there were people who reached out and helped me. They realized what our financial situation was. I remember some of the teachers who were concerned about my welfare. Mr. Dokes, the band teacher, you know, after I had gotten over, you know, being a dummy and I was at the top of the class, I was doing very well. And I was in the band, and I played euphonium, the baritone. I was really good, if I do say so myself. In fact, I was offered a scholarship to Interlochen. Those of you who know about music know how significant that is. I would have been the first person in my high school ever to do that. It would have been a big feather in the band teacher's cap. And he said, Benny, don't accept that scholarship. He says, because you're going to be a great doctor, and I don't want you to get sidetracked. He was concerned about me, not about him. And I remember Miss Miller, you know, English teacher, I started getting off track and hanging out with the wrong people, and she made it quite clear that she was going to kill me if I kept doing that. So, you know, all of those things helped me, but that's what we should be thinking about, helping, giving people opportunity. That's what people of faith do, and we have to remember that we can't act like the others. You know, they attack us. They say all manner of horrible things against us. They're always in the mud. But if we do the same thing, if everybody gets in the mud pit, then all you end up with is a bunch of dirty people. And that's not going to be helpful to us as a country. Somebody has to be the adult. And we have to realize that we, the American people, are not each other's enemies. Some people act that way, and they try to divide us, but let's not allow that to happen. And most importantly, let's not allow anybody to suppress our faith in God. You know, when I came into government, people said to me, you got to stop talking about God so much. I said, that's not happening, because that's a very important part of who I am. And you know, people who say stuff like that, do they realize that our founding document talks about certain unalienable rights given to us by our Creator, a.k.a. God, that the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag says we are one nation under God, that many courtrooms on the wall, it says, in God we trust. Every coin in our pocket, every bill in our wallet says, in God we trust. If it's in our founding documents, it's in our pledges, in our courts, and it's on our money, but we're not supposed to talk about it, what in the world is that? Schizophrenia. You know? And what we need to realize is that our country is based on Judeo-Christian principles and foundations. And we must be willing to stand up for those principles. And the only way that we can be the land of the free is if we are the home of the brave. Thank you very much.